just as a way to get ourselves organized, would it be helpful to think about these action items in relation to the county departments and what power each department might have to move the needle on certain items? Since this is a county plan, like planning can do certain things, Department of Social Services can do certain things. Would it be helpful to break it down like that, or assign sort of or identify departments that would be associated with our proposed actions?
Yeah, I think we can identify departments. I don't know that we can assign work to the departments, but you know how that goes. I just want to apologize.
I had all the power.
I have a note on my computer to record the video, and I just remembered, so I apologize that I forgot to start recording earlier. So yeah, so I think we can identify departments and see where some of these would fit. Like you said, some of these are planning appropriate. Obviously, some of these are going to be parks appropriate. You know, transportation, we don't really have that in the county. So it would be looking at our partner organizations like the WMPA or WAVE, you know, how are we going to look to those organizations? So, so it's kind of beyond just the county, but looking at who the responsible agencies, I think is fair to say, and then seeing where the feedback kind of goes from there. But, and yeah, so I think that makes sense.
Okay, so let's kind of hammer out this first one here. So we've got, I wrote down 4 goals. Tell me if I'm missing anything. We got to preserve the house for living in place, or increasing the variety of housing options available, increasing the amount of housing options available, and increasing the affordability of housing options or living arrangement. Are those?
Yeah.
And then I think the other one is increasing the access, and that's where we come into what I brought up is how do, you know, if you have these $2,500 a month senior living, how do we look at some of the benefits that folks may be eligible that they're not aware of, and that may be some of the education piece of, like, say you get some sort of a VA benefit or Medicaid, you know, how do we look at what options are available? Because it seems overwhelming to pay $2,500 a month, but if there are some tools that you can use.
Yeah, I think we need to be sure that we can make it attractive to them. Your 92-year-old friend, right. You know, make them see what the advantage may be to spending that, and disadvantages. There may be both.
We're just spending money to have someone come into her home to assist her as needed. She wants to age in place, great, but let's support her in doing that and make it work for her.
Right.
So
be sure that the message is getting
access is everything that's close by too. Like, you know, if they have a grocery store, if they've got restaurants, you know, things that are in easy walking distance, or there's a park there. So you know, we talked about that before. You know, I consider that as far as accessibility of where it's going to be.
So how would I word that goal? Somebody help me out here. Increase accessibility of what?
Services.
Services, yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe if we
can
not
include,
and
go ahead.
And that would cover the grocery store, the parks, the you know, the home care people, whatever, the transportation, that all of that is accessibility.
Okay.
It is, but at the same time, in my world, accessibility means something a little different. So maybe we could use a word like connectivity. Does that sound okay to people? Connectivity to services and resources, something like that.
Sure.
Or easy connectivity.
In your world, access means what?
That refers to ADA access, which is also important.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and our access, what we're talking about, is so much more involved.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah,
exactly. Or community connectivity or something like that.
Yes. And
yeah, community. Yeah, I think I like the community part. That's good.
Right. And that brings up my point. My next point was, you know, we cannot just look at city and county services or programs, but also private people in the community who may jump at an opportunity to be able to help, or, you know, may have an existing business that could be integrated into some of this, or they want to start a business that could integrate into this. So I think we need to broaden that scope of when we're looking at potential service providers,
Mhm.
we have a whole lot more options available.
Right. And even people who we don't know yet, right? Because it's a five.
Right.
Yeah, so
Right,
making
exactly.
sure we leave room for opportunity. Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
Okay, so getting back to goal number 1 and starting to hammer back on this and getting it nailed down here. Preserve housing for living in place. We need to look at the physical dwelling, obviously. And we wrote down finances, personal care, transportation. Is there anything else in a broad range under housing for living in place, preserve housing for living in place that we need to include here?
Does safety fit with, is that an additional thing or does that part of kind of home modifications? What are everyone's thoughts?
I think that would be, I think your physical dwelling is one thing, but I think the modifications for safety is a whole different aspect. That's the
It's gotta
handrails,
be
the ramps.
Maintenance, safety of the home.
Right.
That's safety of
Maintenance
that.
and safety, that's a good one.
Okay, so got safety as well. All right. Then we've got finances, personal care, transportation, safety, and physical dwelling. Does that sound good underneath that particular one for as far as our objectives that we're going to look at? Is there anything
Sure.
we're missing?
Because maintenance would include someone to do the yard work.
Well, I have
Do-
maintenance for the land, maintenance for the structure.
Okay,
Right.
good.
Yeah.
You're breaking it down even more. Go, Tom, go. That's good.
We talked about education and case management. Is that something that we want to include?
Yes.
I do have case management written down, but I had it underneath. I didn't make it a larger. It should be a larger scope item. It should be an objective rather than a strategy. So yeah, I'm going to change that.
Right.
Okay, very good. All
Yeah,
right.
that'll be
So then,
important in that aspect. Yeah.
what about under goal number 2 of increasing the variety of housing options available? What are some of the objectives that we would look at there?
Increasing the variety.
I mean,
Maybe
yeah, go
Maybe
ahead.
identifying one or two that we think are the most feasible in the
Right.
next 5 years and building from there.
Right, so some of them that I mentioned are really what we're talking about is some of the areas where seniors are anyway, that we could be doing, Del Webb, which is a big area where seniors are. But some of the little areas that we know where they are, like the supportive service, NORC, providing services for the blocks of that we know that the seniors are in areas. That is probably an easier thing to do, like a 1-year, 2-year plan.
Mm-hmm. Tom, maybe just kind of putting a placeholder and we can hammer out kind of these innovative solutions. I mean, I guess the spirit of this is to just propose some innovative solutions. And maybe, and you mentioned there was another individual who you read kind of his notes, but it would be great to maybe I'd like to do a little more research before I'm comfortable landing on anything.
Right.
Do you all know? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Underneath the increasing the variety of housing options, do you think that one of the objectives might be, or strategy might be, to try and attract private developers to do something like Del Webb?
Well,
Yes.
we're going to have to attract private developers to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you all or do you know about Coastal Cove? I think some of you may know about Coastal Cove. It's assisted living, sort of, but it's more of a home atmosphere. So it's out on Beasley Road, and Justin LeQuire and his mother own it, and it's 5 bedrooms and a communal kitchen and living room and dining room and outdoor space. And it's expensive, but the residents have the freedom to come and go in their rooms, do what they want, cook whatever they want. They have help. They have someone on site all the time. So it's assisted living, but kind of independent. So, and if they get where they need more support, then family would send in a home care company to help. But it's really unique. There's nothing like it here in this area. It's the first one here.
How many people?
It has 5 bedrooms. I think 5. 5
So
bedrooms in it.
At the risk of showing my ignorance in housing, would that be sort of like a group home?
Yeah, that's like
yes.
model.
Co-living?
But it's a higher end group home. It's
Well, I didn't mean, I'm not
No,
speaking
I
to
don't.
humanities or what have you,
I've
just
had
kind of the
experience-
concept.
I've had experience working in the with disabled adults in group homes. So it's a whole different thing for me.
A communal living arrangement, let's go with that.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's so different than assisted living facilities that I've been in. It's much more family oriented. It was absolutely beautiful. And they have a lot of independence to come and go. I mean, they can't just walk out of the building and take off, but the outside space, it's just so nice. And if there were more of that, I think you'd have people like your neighbor or your friend from church that might go, well, this isn't so bad. It's
Because
not
it would
a
also
big
provide
facility.
socialization for them as well.
It does. And they can cook whatever they want. And they actually help cook the meals. So it's
Right.
not
That's
like this is what you have to eat.
Yeah,
Pardon?
that's one of the options, which is nice that they actually have it going on.
Right. And they can go outside if they want, or they can watch TV, or they can go in their room. So there's lots of choice. And so they do have that independence, but they also have someone there making sure they're taking their meds and they're eating properly and those kind of things. So, yeah.
In the chat, Janella's typed that it's what you're describing as a family care home is what she's
Okay.
calling it.
Okay.
And that we did have 3, but 2 are closing soon.
Okay.
Ah,
So maybe that's the terminology, Tom, family care home, which could be like parentheses, co-housing slash
Right.
group housing.
so it'd be interesting to know why it's closed.
She says DSS monitors it the same as assisted living.
And I want to say something that comes up when you get into some of that, like with zoning, and this is the same with like Oxford House, is the definition of what a family is and the household size, where you get into some of that trouble. So maybe one of the recommendations, one of the strategies is looking at changing that definition in our code. Make it
Definition of family.
in like our code to be able to allow for these types of situations where it would normally be restricted because of the size, how many unrelated family members, how many unrelated folks are allowed to live in a home.
Rachel, do you expect that would have, I'm just thinking of college students living together and
There could be some unintended consequences that we would have to think through and maybe work on some of the definition. Obviously Oxford House has their fair housing on their side. We all know about the case law that's on that. So, there's definitely a lot of thought. But if we're going to dream big, we might as well, right?
let's do it. Let's do it. Well, and this is also, as Janella pointed out, it's assisted living. So it's not just
Right.
co-living.
Okay, so under increased housing options available, or variety of housing options available, I have attract private developers, the family care home, development of family care homes, communal living arrangements, and then as part of the strategy, I have changed the definition of family, and I've got that as more of a strategy kind of down the road a little bit there. But what other big items here would be objectives under that? Any others that I missed?
So could we go out and get grants for some of this housing?
Well, that's going to be, I think, part of the strategy that we use to achieve some of these goals. That's kind of where I see that falling. I don't say that it can't happen. I just don't know that would be a goal per se. That might be more of a strategy to make these things happen. Anybody else have any input on that?
What about the accessory dwelling units? Rachel, do you have an update kind of from a planning perspective on what changes or if changes are needed to make that happen?
Yeah, there definitely needs to be a text amendment to make them more accessible. And that is, so for those of you who don't know, we have a workforce housing advisory committee that is also working on some housing goals, and not just related to seniors, but just in general for the county and city. And so that is probably a recommendation, is looking at that. So it will tie in. But there's a lot of strong feelings about making those more accessible to more places to eliminate some of those barriers.
Again, what do you mean by accessible?
Eliminating barriers, where they're allowed, what their heights, what the square footage, setbacks, all of the barriers that keep people from being able to put them in.
Gotcha.
So you're talking about like granny flats? Is that what you're talking about when you say accessory dwelling?
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be,
Okay.
they can be attached, they can be detached. I mean, we're talking about, a garage apartment, or it can be, that,
Sure, okay.
yeah, there's a lot of different terminology for it, I think. They even have those high tech, I don't know if you've heard of those, the granny pods, where, I mean, I've heard of those where there's like cameras on the floor to check for falls, and, there's all sorts of products out there, but trying to see what would be open, in general, so.
Okay.
So is the planning committee that you're working on doing anything else? Are they addressing any other senior housing issues besides the ADUs?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking also at, like I think I mentioned about, where these assisted livings can go by right without having to get a rezoning to that location. Looking at, like I kind of mentioned a little bit about cooperative living, what the definition of a household or family is, if that could be tweaked to allow for some of these. And then just, I think, affordable housing in general affects seniors just like it does everyone, but sometimes more. And that's where we're looking at some of those aging in place of those repair and modifications, repairs, neighborhood stabilization for some deferred maintenance, some issues like that. So kind of all over the place. But yeah, there's some that are specifically focused for seniors and some that'll touch on seniors that are intended for the entire community.
I'm just wondering if we're doing like the same thing. If we're like.
That's why I'm on this committee, to be able to help make sure that it's working collaboratively.
Okay, so I kind of combined the two because as we talked, it looked like the two were kind of marrying a little bit some of the same objectives. So I put increase the variety and amount of housing options. And then underneath that, I have attract the private developers, look at family care homes that are similar to those that are monitored, the assisted livings that are monitored by DSS, communal living arrangements. And then underneath that, one of the strategies was to make this doable is to change the definition of family with regard to the housing planning group. And then I have grant funding, look into grant funding underneath that. Is there anything else that I'm missing on that particular goal that was discussed while I was writing that I missed? Okay. Let's look at the next goal, which we had identified as increasing the affordability of housing options. That's another one where I listed grant funding as an option. But after that, I'm kind of at a loss. Anyone have any ideas as to how we could lower the price of affordable housing, make housing affordable for our seniors?
Tom, I'll just suggest an edit to the goal itself to preserve low-cost housing, preserve housing that is already low cost, and to create more low-cost housing, because I guess some of the things I'm thinking of are, for instance, like the increase recently in property tax, and if there wasn't a way to do something about that specifically for seniors. I'm just thinking about that, how costs keep increasing. And is there a way to keep the cost the same for X amount of years, or, that idea?
So preserve and create low cost housing options, existing and low cost housing options. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm almost thinking of like fixed
Or should
rates.
they be two goals?
It might be two goals, because creating new housing is certainly different than, this might be preserving what we already have. So let's say we already have some low cost housing. We can preserve the home itself, but what are we doing to preserve the price, the rent cost, or whatever, the cost of that housing? I'm almost thinking of like a fixed housing cost, or again, just an idea, but are there actions we can take to maintain low cost in the housing that we already have? There are some, just thinking about federal programs for developers, and there are tax breaks if you keep housing at this rate, this low cost rate, affordable rate for X amount of years. Think there are things like that that are in place. So
Okay.
that makes sense. It doesn't really make sense, but
Well, I kind of divided it up then. I put in
Yeah.
preserve lower cost housing options and then create new lower cost housing options.
I think Florida has it where seniors don't get tax increases on the homes or something like that.
You said you think that's in Florida?
Yeah, it's in Florida. They either don't get an increase. It stabilizes at a certain age.
Yeah. I think hey Tom, it's Evan. I joined late. I'm sorry if I've missed anything. I think that's a great point is, there have to be incentives behind all this for, some of the private builders. I think Vanessa was kind of hitting on that. Like there has to be some kind of incentives for these private builders to want to do this, right? Stop.
Right.
Sorry, my kid barked.
My mother was just here a minute ago. I get you. Go ahead.
Which
think
these incentives would have to be run through the county, city, right? It'd have to be controlled to bring or attract builders to want to do this,
Mhm.
right? Otherwise, they're just going to go and make more money somewhere else. So some kind of incentivize these guys to want to be involved and do this, and also to the point of, if the clients, the end users do buy these structures that are built, what kind of benefits are it for them, such as what was just mentioned, tax increases or tax increases stop at a certain point in age or something like that. So it's like a twofold, right? Incentivize the builders to build it, and then there's an incentive to attract the buyers to get into these properties.
Mhm.
Right.
And Evan, I'm thinking you go to like Liberty, an existing company that has independent living, all these, they might go, wow, this would be a different route for us to take, or an additional route for us to offer. And so as a company, they may jump on one of these ideas and want to do some of this co-housing or some of these other things. So I think there are other strategies. You're right.
the other strategy that I'm thinking of, and this is something maybe Rachel can speak to, where that's at with the I guess it's a task force, housing task force, but along the lines of incentivizing, there's also potentially a disincentive or a fine if you aren't going to do X amount of units that are affordable. Then you would pay whatever the fine is, and that money could go into a housing trust fund, and that could fund some of the initiatives we're talking about, like no property tax increase for seniors, et cetera. So
That's
there might be
actually a fantastic idea to like these builders that are
credit for it, but
these builders that are killing it around here. They pick and choose where they want to build at, but if they're building in our area, which is sometimes adverse effects to what we're trying to accomplish, they have to meet. Yeah, if they don't build a certain amount of affordable stuff, then they no longer can build here.
Right.
But you don't want them to leave, right?
Right.
So maybe a penalty, which might be a small penalty to them, which they will pay to keep operating, but that money can be built up and accumulate to, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I think Asheville has just, and again, Rachel's the expert on this, but Asheville's just done something, and it's down to the city or the county to regulate, and they can do that. They can rule that any development, it's part of development regulations. A certain amount of units must be accessible, a certain amount must be affordable, at this rate. And if that's not going to happen, then there's a particular fine.
So,
Go ahead,
so
Sorry.
No, it's actually not legal in North Carolina. It's called inclusionary zoning. And so there's a few communities that do it, Chapel Hill and a few other places, but typically what happens is they settle out of court before anything actually really happens. So they kind of have it on the books, but it doesn't actually always work out. And so that's one of the biggest issues. But what we do have, like the city of Wilmington has in place for any of their public-private developments that they have. This came into play after River Place happened, but for future developments, for example, the old Wave Transit on Castle Street, that site, it was the city owns it, and so they were doing this property conveyance to nonprofits, but there was a point system when they were doing the bids and everything, and if a project had a certain number of affordable housing, they got higher points. So it's not required in any of their proposals, but you get higher points if you include affordable housing in your proposals. We don't require it here at the county, but you probably have seen whether it's the government redesign or Project Grace, both of those include a small percent for workforce housing. But, like you said, Vanessa, sometimes it's great to include a certain amount of accessible housing as well, and not just looking at the price points, but also the accessibility for folks. So kind of looking at it like that. So instead, kind of the alternative, instead of requiring or putting a fine, the alternative is to create the incentive. So how do you make it attractive for folks to put these affordable units in? And so it doesn't, hurt their bottom line, but it has that public benefit. And so we're still trying to find the answer to that, what developers need to be able to make their numbers work and also have this piece in there. So well, when that happens.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I had it all wrong. But so it seems like the point system might be something to strive for in the county.
That's actually extremely smart, because so the point system will, once they accrue more points, their RFPs will basically be pushed to the top of the stack, right? They're more preferred, if you will.
So so it's in city projects. I just want to point that out. So it's in the city of Wilmington for any of their public-private partnerships. So it's when the city owns land and they're doing this redevelopment projects. And so they have a scoring matrix, and if you include affordable housing in there, you get a certain number of points. And they may have changed this since I left, but this was, I know, like I said, the old Wave Transit, that was one of the pieces of it. So it's a great project because it encourages developers to put that in there.
Rachel, to your knowledge, this follow-up question, has that had any impact to your knowledge?
I'm not sure. I know that like I said, the Wave Transit was the last one that, I was working at the city, that came through. But that was also, nothing's really happened in other aspects because of the pandemic. So
True.
Those incentives are something that the Housing Coalition has worked on for quite a while. So it's been in the works for a while.
Okay.
Or is it the deep pockets of the builders that are paying for this stuff to not go through?
Yeah.
Okay. Next thing that the other goal that we came up with was increasing connectivity to services and resources. I don't know a lot of the different communities. Again, housing is not really my thing, but I know that when Brunswick Forest went up, they started building in a lot of items and resources that were convenient to folks that rarely did you have to leave your subdivision to be able to get these items. Dentists, chiropractor, restaurants, coffee shop, medical facility, they
Grocery
just keep
store.
Grocery store, right. So that was actually, I think, it's a huge community, but it looks to me to be fairly well thought out, but it's so big that folks are not within walking distance for certain. But if they had some sort of tram or something that would be able to provide that service within that community, I think that's pretty well laid out. Let's discuss that a little bit. So that's the goal, was to increase connectivity to services and resources. What are some of the objectives that we would want to do within that goal? And some of the strategies.
Well, I mean, I think we'd have to figure out how we're gonna make it happen. I mean, we've identified what that means, but how do we make that, how do we put those pieces together? What's the process to make that all happen? I think we need to identify that.
Exactly. And how it's sustainable.
Exactly. And who's paying, how's it gonna be paid for? I mean, you're going to have people, we do case management or we do all these things we were talking about. Well, where's the money coming from to do that? Is the homeowner, if they want to age in place and have accessibility to things, are they paying a portion of the fee? I mean, I think that's what we need to talk about, the process and then how that's all going to fall out.
We may be looking at the development of, and I don't know how much land there is out there, but the development of communities that are specific to have these types of resources, as opposed to trying to make existing neighborhoods work.
Right.
For example, where I live, if I needed bus service, I don't have it. So,
Right.
and if I were older and knew I needed bus service, I would not have moved where I'm at. So I think that.
Or would you take the bus if you're older? You also have to consider that.
Good point.
Would
Or
you
even
be-
have DART
right.
service, which gets back to the educational piece, because so many folks
Right.
don't know what DART service is and where they can,
Right.
where they can live, and folks from out of town have no clue on that. But, okay, so I guess I was thinking more in terms of building new when I was talking, when we talked about
That's
the goal of connectivity.
Mhm.
And our job isn't necessarily to find the funding for this. Our job is to identify the needs that the community has and then let county leadership deal with that. That's why they make the big bucks. Not that we can't help along the way with trying to define some objectives and strategies, but
All right, but how much land do we have available to build? in
that's
this
what I'm
county?
saying.
Everywhere
There's that much
everywhere I
land
turn
out.
around, no, everywhere I turn around, they're building something. The land, trees are being bulldozed down and things are going up. I mean, how much land really honestly is there to build something like that in this community?
And the communities that I've noticed are more and more
Eric?
apartments.
Well, the area by off Sudbury Road, like that area up there, there's as much as the town of Leland up in the northern part of the county that's undeveloped.
Okay, but what about more closer into town? I
Like the
mean,
infill, yeah. I mean, that's what you have to look at is some of these infill lots, and so yeah.
But let's say you've got a developer to come in with some incentives to build some reasonably priced community out there in the northern part of the county that would attract people, just like Del Webb down at
right.
River Heights. I mean, you're not in the city there. I mean, to drive into, Wilmington or
Right.
whatever, you're far removed. But you have,
Right.
quote unquote, everything you need in the Del Webb community. So
Well, to a
maybe that's
point.
something we look at expanding into the northern part of the county. Maybe that's a goal, is increasing the number of, do this connectivity through services and resources by utilizing land in the northern part of the county. Actually,
Yeah, I mean, Live Oak, they just built a massive facility out there. And I mean, there's land around there. And now that is all work, but they take up so much space that could literally be a small community.
So would we want to revise that goal, saying increase, to build communities that have increased services and resources in the northern part of the county? Or do we want to leave that out and just say, let them decide where it's going to be, but leave it
Let
with
them
what?
decide.
we originally
Yeah,
said?
I wouldn't get into location.
Okay,
Yeah. No, because I look at Del Webb. I mean, there's smoke on the water. There's a few businesses nearby, but there isn't all the medical offices and grocery stores and all that other stuff. They have to drive. So right now, when they're young enough and they move in and they can drive, it's great. But as they age, and maybe they're unable to drive or something, they don't have the resources nearby. So I wouldn't limit that.
okay. Okay, so if we're not limiting it, we're saying increasing communities with connectivity to services and resources.
Mhm.
What are some objectives underneath that goal that we need to put into place to make this a realization?
I think we need to talk about another sort of term, is complete communities, but that's pedestrian infrastructure, basically. Emphasis on pedestrian infrastructure, emphasis on, I would say, embedded transportation options of some kind. Some, living facilities have their own vehicle where they can do trips for residents, and others do not, but, you know, having transportation be on the forefront of what we're talking about rather than an afterthought.
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, and we'll get into transportation next meeting, but when you think about it, transportation is what, for the folks that are aging in place that can no longer drive, I mean, this is their lifeline basically to be able to get to the services and the resources that they need to get to, whether they be in Wilmington or in the northern part of the county, what have you. But it's key for them to be able to have that. And then we also need to look at the affordability of that same thing to be able to get them there. And we're going to have a far greater number of people that are going to want to stay in their homes, age in place, as opposed to the folks that we're going to be able to provide the type of housing that we're talking about. Because like you said, Pam, the baby boomers, of which I am one, we're getting there. So, you know, there's just a plethora of apartments and things going up. I am not one that particularly enjoys apartment living, so I will try and stay in my home as long as I can. We bought a one-story house knowing we're not getting any younger. So, and, you know, walk-in baths, all those kinds of things. So, but that might get back to the educational piece of being able to provide folks with that information so that when they're not 80, but they're in their 60s, that maybe this is maybe what you want to look at before that time comes, so that you don't become a 92-year-old friend in a 2-story house with no bathroom downstairs.
Right. And I think the communities like the Brunswick Forest would be very attractive to people who, I'm in a 3-story condo, you know, so my bedroom's upstairs, and I need anything, I might get up and down 32 steps when I come in the house. Right. So as I get a little bit older, I'll be looking for something 1-story, and that would be very attractive to me to have everything right there that I need. So I think if we could have some of those developments in town, that would be ideal to people. I think it would be great. So, and that's where we would say, that's where we need the medical people and the grocery stores and the coffee shops, and so they can walk or have a little golf cart they could drive around if they're able to drive, that they don't have to take their car. That would make it community, home feeling, and they have their independence, but yet they're everything's close by. Because I'll tell you honestly, a lot of these seniors shouldn't be driving, and they are, and it's scary. And so if they're in a place where they can access it by walking, even better.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example. Brunswick Forest. My parents live in there, and they have a rec center. They have the grocery store. I mean, everything's right there.
Right.
And even if they don't drive, maybe a golf cart. If they can't do a golf cart, you have to think about, hey, what does the rec center there offer from an amenity standpoint to live there? To just, I mean, it could be as easy as one of those where the guy runs with the carriage behind his back. You see him downtown sometimes. Yeah, rickshaw, man. Like, I mean, you can get a bunch of college students to do that. I mean,
that's funny, Evan. I like the idea of the tram, though. Like, if there was a community and they had a tram where someone really wasn't able to drive, but they could call the tram to come pick them up and drop them, you know, take them someplace would be ideal.
Tom, you're muted.
I can't hear you.
Tom, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I apologize. So what I was saying is sort of like maybe what Wave has with the downtown trolley, that would have something similar to that would run on a schedule that would take folks to and from, and it would make that whole loop. So you could, in a multiple seating when we're not in COVID restrictions, that you would be able to get to and from, do your shopping, go to the dentist, go get a chiropractor, stop and get a coffee, whatever the case may be, knowing that that tram is going to come by, or that trolley is going to come by and pick you up, you know, every 30 minutes or whatever. I think that would be a great addition to a place like Brunswick Forest, given the scope and the size of that area out there. That development is huge. So that would be maybe an opportunity to help enhance a community, is to be able to provide, and we could include that under our transportation goal, to be able to maybe offer something like that or advise that in these larger communities where these folks could stay in that community. But as your folks age, Evan, and get to the point where they want to age in place because they're in a great community, they're still going to need the help with maybe the house maintenance and modifying the house and the yard maintenance and that kind of thing, to be able to live independently, have everything they need in the resources, but also they're going to need that assistance. So but that's a great option.
Just a question about what you were just describing. Are you imagining that specifically in Brunswick Forest to be a public transportation project, or what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I didn't know. I mean, it could potentially be something that Brunswick County could offer. I'm sure they would want some, to collect some tax dollars on that to be able to offer that, because it does cost money to operate it. Or potentially it could be, someone that would come in and an entrepreneurship decide to provide transportation to clients in the area. Maybe something, I'm assuming they have an HOA, maybe something that the HOA would want to contribute some funds to help finance. And it might be run and owned by the HOA. I mean, because not everybody in that facility, in that area, in that development is, an older person. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of young people that live out in Brunswick Forest. It's a nice area for sure. So that might be something. Are you taking notes there, Evan? Maybe you can provide some service.
Thinking, Evan, that's when you said that, Vanessa. I was thinking, even as we're talking, I'm just thinking of all these opportunities for private entrepreneurs or individuals.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about a business that I could build to where it's a golf cart business, and what happens is the HOA pays for them, and they have a little place inside Brunswick Forest. It's at 9 to 5, and they go to and from, and they're paid from probably an HOA or something like that. But it's little pods placed throughout the communities that are close-knit communities that have access to these the medical, like, you don't have to get on 17. You can just take a golf cart from their home to the grocery store. You wait for them, or you can let them walk around, do what they want. They're on call. You have a little pager. And it's 6-seater golf cart. You have 4 or 5 of them,
and a business is born, Evan.
You're welcome. I only take 20% in residuals.
That's right. And we all get free rides.
That's right. I mean, I think that's a great opportunity. I think that's something that could be used. I don't know how many other facilities that we have like that. I don't know if Del Webb offers anything like that in their communities or not.
I don't think they do, and because most of those people are not quite to that age where they're not driving yet. And there's really not anything other than, like I said, smoke on the water across the street and a few shops. There's really not the grocery store, the doctors, all that. So eventually they're supposed to be. I mean, I live up in the Cape, so I'm down River Road all the time. And they are building all these other houses, for anybody, not just for the aging population. And supposedly there's going to be all this other development and movie theaters and all that stuff. Who knows when that'll happen? So at this point, no, I don't think that's necessary, but I think there are other communities that would be handy to have.
And within, just staying on the same subject for just a moment, in Brunswick County, I'm sure you have, I don't know what the demographic is there, but I'm sure there is a number of people that are younger and would not be utilizing that service. Then again, they might want to say, you know what? Hey, it's Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, whatever. Let's go down, let's get a drink or two and have dinner, and we can use the transportation back home. So they may want to be involved in that too.
And then alcohol comes in the picture. Insert the alcohol, right? Like, hey, we're going to the bar and drinking. I need a ride.
That's it.
You can wear the
golf cart ready,
right? You where they all pedal while they're drinking beer on it, driving around Brunswick
No,
Forest.
they would not be able to do that, but those participants could.
Yeah.
All right, very good. So what other ideas do we have that we haven't covered? I guess what I can do is I can put together a list of everything that we've kind of discussed. I'll go back and review this video and try and get something out. And we're off tomorrow, so I guess probably get something out Monday, hopefully. I'll try and work on it this afternoon to be able to get something out so we can kind of review what we talked about, kind of digest it a little bit. Maybe come back with some things. Oh, we missed this, we missed that. We need to add this, need to add that. We need to add this strategy, what have you. I think we've got a good base of goals within housing. So I'll shoot that out to you. We'll chop on it a little bit, come back and discuss it. And then we'll be without Rachel next meeting, but we'll get through it as best we can, and I'll send it over to her so that she can kind of take a look at it and add her information as well. And then next week we'll talk a bit about about outdoor spaces, and then we'll try and come back in that last meeting and nail down goals for transportation and goals for outdoor spaces. Housing I knew was going to be a biggie. I think that even though transportation is big, I'm not sure it's going to be as time consuming as what housing was. And I think outdoor spaces will not require as much time either. So, and now that we're not doing technology, for those of you that maybe didn't get the email, is that they're now taking that on in another group, the technology aspect and bridging the digital divide. So Andrew's group has been discussing that. Everything kind of keeps reverting in their group back to technology. So they just decided they would take that on. Anybody have anything else that we need to discuss or bring up here on housing? Anything that we missed? Any goals that just popped into your head? Any new business ventures that we all want to be involved in? Anything like that?
I guess, Tom, I'm just thinking like housing, you know, banks, lenders, credit unions, those are all potential partners when we're talking about any housing initiative.
And I think that's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I send this out to you, if you could also put groups, whether when I say group, not necessarily a specific group, but just like you said, a bank or a lender needs to be involved in this. We need a partner in this. WARM certainly would be a partner in a lot of the things we're talking about with housing. So list those groups. I think that the information that Rachel sent out earlier did have a lot of that information. We covered it earlier in meeting number 1, I think, or meeting 2. We covered it in meeting 2. So that information that she sent out, or that I sent out, with kind of recapping her part of that conversation, I think would be helpful in identifying partners or identifying groups underneath the strategy is how we get there.
And we didn't talk about low-income homeowners a lot, so I just want to be sure that we don't they don't get lost in the shuffle.
About existing housing projects, or
yes, yeah,
yeah, and I think that's
because there's still a need for them to be able to age in place and still have the opportunity for these new initiatives that we hope are going to come about.
Are you particularly talking about like government subsidized housing, or are you talking about income-based housing, or what?
Not income-based housing, yeah. And, even in the rural areas, not the Brunswick Forest, but, in the more rural areas, it's probably, transportation is going to be a big issue for them. It already is now. It's going to continue to be a big issue. So I just want to make sure that they don't fall off the radar like they, tend to do sometimes.
Rachel, you still on here?
I am. Sorry, I keep calling people. So
No problem. Just a question, and I don't know if your group is involved in this much, but the groups that are government housing areas that we have, how does the money go about for remodeling and updating and providing them? Do you have any input on that?
So there's no HUD doesn't give money really for a lot of these projects like they used to, that you used to see. And so the Housing Authority is looking at some bonds, like with the tax credit bonds that they'll be working on for some of the redevelopment. New Hanover County doesn't have any funding that goes into these projects. The city of Wilmington does get some money from the federal government that they can use to help support some of those redevelopment and rehabilitations, but it's not a lot of money, and it's not often that they're able to do that. So it's small scale. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yep. Okay, so on the income-based housing that you were talking about, as far as developing a goal for that, what kind of things would you like to include?
I think it can be in the same goals, and I don't want to prolong the meeting, so I don't want to go down a different path, but I think it can be in the same goals. I just don't want us to lose sight of the fact that the need, we were talking about Brunswick Forest, for instance, the needs in rural Brunswick County aren't going to be the same as they are in Brunswick Forest, for instance.
Right.
So just to think a little bit broader when we're going through these goals and objectives.
Right. Gotcha. And we can include that in some of the objectives and strategies, and that we would list that and maybe we just come out and say that, ensure transportation to the rural areas of Greater Wilmington area.
That's perfect. Yeah.
And we can address that also, Vanessa, in our transportation, goals and objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just, there's I keep saying Brunswick, but it's because we were using that as an example.
Right.
But there are different pockets all over New Hanover County that are treated, that need to be handled in different ways, perhaps.
Sure.
And absolutely, and rural transportation is so different because there are no usually sidewalks, et cetera. So there's just not that pedestrian infrastructure, and the houses are really far apart. So
Absolutely.
it just is a different animal completely.
Yep.
Anything else that we need to bring up in this meeting? Anybody can think of? Okay, I'll go ahead and start getting started on some notes, and I'll get those out to you as soon as I can. If you would, please look them over, chop on them, come up with any new ideas, anything that we might have missed. Think along the lines of objectives and strategies that we might have missed, and we'll go ahead and see if we can't get housing sort of wrapped up to present to the steering committee. And then next week, we'll after we wrap housing up, we'll get into outdoor spaces. And then we'll use our last meeting for transportation, getting our goals and objectives for transportation, and wrap up anything else that we might need. We may find some time next meeting as well that we can get to transportation a little bit early as well. So anything else that we need to discuss in this particular meeting?
Tom, I have a quick question regarding the process. You kind of hit on it now. Is we come up with these observations, suggestions, and everything. We compile them, and then we present it to the steering committee. What happens after that? Does the steering committee filter that out and then present, or how does that process work?
We're gonna try and rank our goals and objectives under each category that we're talking about, under transportation, under housing, and under outdoor spaces, as to what we feel is the most important: goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. We're then going to present that to the steering committee. They're going to take a look at it, and they're going to agree, disagree, whatever that particular group before they send it. They're going to start taking a look at finances, that type of thing. They're going to send it to county leadership and make these recommendations. This is what we have for a recommendation for housing. This is what we had as a recommendation for transportation and so forth. And then it's going to be ultimately up to the county leadership to determine what is actually going to get done. But our suggestions are going to go to the steering committee. Steering committee will then review them, see if there is something in there that they disagree with, or they think, not disagree with, but that they just don't think can happen in a 5-year period of time, because the steering committee is going to have a lot of higher level folks than where I'm at. I've got my little transportation department here, and they're going to be able to think in a much broader scale and say, yeah, well, this is a great idea, but it's probably not feasible within the next 5 years. Not to say that within the next 2 years, we won't be working on another 5-year plan, so that we can constantly be able to stay ahead a little bit. Right now we're playing catch up, but because I think older folks were an afterthought for a long time. And so hopefully we'll be able to put them in the forefront and be able to get some things at least in motion. That's the goal, is to get some things in motion and have a plan for New Hanover County so that they can actually, and they bought into it, county leadership has bought into this master aging plan. So they are committed to get things done. So
that's actually, you hit on my next question. So I guess the question is like, is this a top-down initiative from the county to you? So you guys came up with this master aging plan idea, proposal, and sent it up, and they've bought into it, and they came back and said, okay, show me what it's going to look like.
Correct.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yep, it's a grassroots type thing. We weren't the first ones to come up with it, obviously. Orange County has it. There's a lot of counties throughout the United States that has it. The Senior Resource Center took it on as a goal to try and improve the living conditions and the resources for older adults here. And we kind of took a little bit of the plan from Orange County, some of the topics, because their transportation is universal, housing universal. I know Andrew added a couple of other ones here that he's specifically familiar with, but we took a lot of the main topics that were being discussed in Orange County and some of these other master aging plans, and they've been included for us to chop on. And I think what they're probably, I mean, if I were them, what I would do is also go back and look at Orange County and say, is there anything that they might have missed within housing here? And if they did, then maybe we need to add this in or augment this, or, you know, and they'll be adding key point indicators. I think we would just get too bogged down into putting key point indicators into, after we develop strategies, goals, and objectives. I think it would just, we'd need more than 5 weeks to be able to accomplish that. So I think they'll be able to hone it down with a limited, more limited group of people. What's going to show that we're making progress is basically what the key point indicators are going to be doing, and I think that can be accomplished at a higher level than us. But yeah, they bought into it. It's a grassroots type thing, and that's what makes it kind of exciting to see if we can't make some difference out there. Anything else?
I think we did good today.
I think so. I think we got a lot of information out there. Like I said, I'll send this out to you, and if I miss anything or whatever, please shoot me an email, and you know, I'll add it in there. Other than that, I hope you all have a very happy Easter weekend, and I will see you next Thursday at 2.
All right. Happy Easter, y'all.
Bye.
Thank
Happy Easter.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tom.
Take care, Evan. Bye-bye.